start today. Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
One of the best ways to build a healthier local economy is by shopping locally. Teamster Advantage is a shop local program started by Teamster Local 1932 that has brought together hundreds of locally owned businesses to provide discounts for residents who make shopping locally their priority. Everything from restaurants like Corky's to fun times at SB Raceway and much, much more. If you're not currently a Teamster and you want access to these local business discounts, contact Jennifer at 909-889-8377, extension 224. Give her a call. That number again is 909-889-8377, extension 224.
Miss your favorite show? Download the podcast at kcaaradio.com.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Winning. Winning. You remember when Donald Trump said you get tired of winning? The 4 years that he was in office, that kind of winning, not so much. But I'll tell you, Joe Biden killing it this week. The Holy Mansion, holy moly, Joe Manchin. I'm waiting for him to Lucy this again, but looks like there may be a deal on the climate issue, maybe something on the tax issue, maybe, Manchin has said that he will support what is being called the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. What they are saying is that this is going to help bring in some additional revenues. They're going to do that by raising the minimum corporate tax 15%, which means, sorry, you don't get to pay zero. They say that's going to bring in about $313 billion. They're doing some prescription drug pricing reform, which they think is going to raise about $288 billion. They're going to add some money into the IRS to make them go after rich people, get them to pay their taxes. I think that's a good thing. They claim that's going to bring in about $124 billion, and the carried interest loophole that they're going to do something with. They're saying about $14 billion. They're going to invest in energy security, some climate change stuff. They're going to invest somewhere around $369 billion there and extend the Affordable Care Act so that people can continue to get affordable health insurance. That's going to cost about $64 billion. They're saying it's going to reduce our deficit. And I know Manchin's fixated on reducing the deficit, but they're saying about $300 billion in deficit reduction. I don't know in this moment that's the most important thing, but it's one of those must-haves. If it gets to get something done on the climate front, we start moving in that direction. If we start taxing our billionaires and corporate America, I think it's a step in the right direction. And look, this is one of these moments, because we talked about this yesterday with the CHIPS Act that passed. I'm for years not in favor of handing money over to corporate America. Again, the CHIPS Act going to invest billions of dollars in reshoring manufacturing, which I got to tell you, I think is extremely important, something that we absolutely have to do. They're going to invest about $280 billion in shoring up our American manufacturing, bringing back our ability to make stuff again. And if the pandemic taught us anything, we need to make stuff. And we need to be, if we're going to continue to have that entrepreneurial edge, that creative edge, got to make stuff. Kind of important. And as much as I'm against the idea of handing corporate America money, it's got to come with strings attached. And I'm hoping, devil in details. I'm looking forward to seeing that. But we got to do this. Now, I find it interesting that this happens the day after the CHIPS bill passes because, and this is the part where we've been beating up on Joe Manchin for quite some time. And, to be honest, it deserved a little bit of it. But this could be one of those things where Joe Biden, being a wily veteran, Joe Biden being someone who has been around the Senate a day or two, understands how to maneuver, understands how the game is played, and was never hyperbolic and never really going after Manchin and Sinema, I think may have played this the right way. May have held the cards close to the vest, played the ace when he needed to, because if you remember, Mitch McConnell was going to tank the CHIPS bill if there's any talk of climate legislation, any talk of tax legislation, any talk of any of the other agenda were to move. McConnell's bargaining chip was tank the CHIPS bill, because he knew manufacturing was something near and dear to Biden's heart, something the country desperately needs, a win that the Democrats really wanted and need. So, naturally, McConnell holding the Democrats hostage. It's interesting that the very next day from the passage of that CHIPS Act, that this then goes and, yep, this is what we're doing. Seems interesting. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly what happened. I'm saying this seems quite plausible and seems like something that, I got to tell you, seems like something I think Biden would pull off. As I've said, I think highly of Joe Biden. I think he's somebody who knows how to play the game as well as anyone. This a big part of it. So a good week. Now, what's interesting? You got the big win on the CHIPS bill. We're gonna start making those important little things that make our smartphones smart, that make our smart bombs smart, that make our cars smart. Because evidently we're too stupid. But, the things we need to make stuff. We're going to start doing that, and that's good. We're going to start addressing the climate, maybe start taxing some folks. So it was not surprising to me that Senate Republicans just blocked the PACT Act. Say that 10 times fast. The PACT Act. Something that had Republican support just weeks ago, now has been blocked. Is this a tit for tat? Is this a, now we're angry kind of moment? Now, this is a critical piece of legislation for our veterans, because this is a veterans health care bill. It's something, again, as I said, Republicans supported. It's one of those things that should pass the U.S. Senate 100-0. It's that kind of legislation. And I say this all the time. If you're going to put people in harm's way, if you're going to call on our nation's youth to go and be the heroes that we prop them up to be, you got to treat them like that when they return. When they return with all of the illnesses and all of the broken, you name it, the substance abuse, the broken bodies, the broken minds, all of that. You've got to deal with that, and you've got to make them as close to whole as possible. And when you burn stuff and they get toxic diseases and cancers, you got to deal with that too. And that's what this vote was. It was to advance what was called the Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, honoring our promise to address Comprehensive Toxics Act, the PACT Act. Didn't pass today. And as I said, it seems like a tit for tat thing. Now, this legislation was named after Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson, who died in 2020 from toxic exposure because of his military service. And again, I go back to, this seems like a no-brainer. This seems like something that should have just gone through, should not even have been an issue. But this is what happens, and this is what just seems to happen far too often, where issues that shouldn't be issues for what seemed to be no reason pop up. And I always ask the question, if this is how we treat this generation of heroes, who's going to be the next generation? Very scary stuff. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Love to hear your thoughts. Now, look, as I've been saying, this administration, and I've said this a bunch of times, so there's no one who's going to be surprised by it. Biden was not my first choice. I was a Bernie Sanders guy from the start. I was a Bernie Sanders guy back in 2016 as well. But Joe Biden's got some stuff done. I mean, you go back to the American Rescue and Recovery Act. You go back to that. We got that historic infrastructure bill passed through. You got the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act passed through. You got the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, gun reform that hasn't, the last, 4 presidents couldn't get anything done on. You've got, just same day as that, you had the Keep Kids Fed Act. I think this is the one that gets me the most, because if you remember during the Obama years, Republicans were losing their minds over the idea that Michelle Obama would say, no, we need to feed children at school. The fact that some of them, a couple of them, would vote for this, pretty remarkable. Joe Biden did that. They're going to help pay some of the reimbursement costs for school meals and provide meals at child care centers. It's a pretty big deal, I think. It's something that was taken away during the Reagan years. Pretty big deal. And then you've got the CHIPS Act, really important. And now you moved legislation on climate and taxes. And look, there's a ton more. I was going through the website at the White House, whitehouse.gov, on legislation, and there's literally 10 pages of stuff. As I was going through, I'm going, wow, I didn't realize that. Because our media doesn't spend a lot of time on that. Because he's actually getting stuff done, actually signing things into law. But there's too many people going, Joe Biden, he's senile. For a guy who's senile and Sleepy Joe, and a guy who doesn't do much, he's sure done a lot. I give him credit for that. And ushering through in a 50-50 Senate. Remember, 50-50 Senate. I think it's a big deal. I think this is a good week for Joe, and I think, look, good timing. Winning on legislation, going to start seeing inflation coming down, going to start seeing gas prices have been coming down for the last month and a half. You don't hear the right whining about that. In fact, when it's coming down too fast. Yeah, I'm waiting for the next outrage, the next distraction. Oh, that's right. It was Kamala Harris today saying to a group of blind people that she was wearing blue and that she was a woman and that she was sitting at a table. Yeah, that was the outrage today. Crazy, crazy stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. Generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I had an interesting conversation with a Trump supporter. And it was one of those, had the hat and everything, bought the T-shirt, full-fledged Trumpy, and but willing to listen, willing to at least engage in a discussion. And the topic of a recession, Joe Biden's, of course, the Joe Biden's done all this, and crime is rampant, and the recession's all his fault, and the interest rate hikes, and of course the Federal Reserve has announced a 0.75% point increase in the interest rates, and to him that's just the end of the world, and he doesn't know why, but it's the end of the world for him. And it was one of these moments where I started explaining and talking about this idea that we've been pitted against each other on really dangerous grounds. And I pointed to this story about the money in our politics. And there's a story right now that over at Reuters about the drug maker Merck, who has avoided billions of dollars of taxes by how this worked is they made their top selling cancer drug in the Netherlands, and their corporate office, I guess, they ran all of their business through Ireland. No, the patents were in the Netherlands. This is what it was. The patents were in the Netherlands, and it was manufactured in Ireland, but sold here. So they just basically ran all the profits out of the country, but profited mightily, and got away with it. And it's one of these things where you go, corporate America is just robbing us blind at every turn, and feeding us this narrative of it's the other, it's your neighbor, it's that Democrat, it's that liberal, it's that conservative, it's the other, it's look to your right, look to your left, it's them. It's not the person up in the boardroom. Same thing with gas prices. Oh no, it's Joe Biden who did this. Instead of the reality that it's ExxonMobil and Shell and Chevron and all of them who are seeing record profits, taking advantage of an opportunity. This is an opportunity. It is what it is. It's monopoly. It's mass consolidation. There's no competition in that marketplace. And we began having this conversation about taxes and well, the government just wants to steal all our money. And I go, the reality is, the Tea Party did an amazing thing for a portion of this country, and it got them to think that they're taxed enough already, that they're the most taxed generation in the history of civilization. Nobody's been more taxed than we are. And I would argue, as a working class, we are sufficiently taxed. So when I said, look, when you're talking about taxation, who are we talking about? When you're talking about taxed enough already, who are you talking about? And he's like, well, me and you and us. I go, okay, as long as we understand on who we're talking about. Corporate America has walked away from paying their taxes. I look at Merck. They've gotten away with avoiding billions of dollars in paying taxes because they've figured out how to lobby for massive loopholes. They've got avoidance lawyers who figure out how to use those loopholes. They've figured it out. And I went on to explain to him, I said, look, in 1952, when we had a good socialist president like Republican Dwight David Eisenhower, the top marginal tax rate in this country was 92%. And he's like, no, it wasn't. I go, yeah, it was. And everybody paid a bit of taxes. And every $2,000, that tax rate went up incrementally until you got to 92%. So the more money you made, the higher your tax rate went up. The bigger your shoulders, the more water you carried back to the cave, however you want to frame that. Today, that number is 37%. How did we go from a top marginal rate of 92% all the way down to 37%? Right now, it's 37% on people making over $638,000. The corporate tax rate in 1952, from 1952 to 63, for the first $25,000 was 30%. Anything over 25 grand was 52%. We had a graduated tax system where small businesses paid less, big businesses paid more. because we understood there's a difference. We want to encourage small business ownership. We want to encourage people to hang out their shingle. We want to give them a chance to compete with the big boy by paying a lower tax rate, because we want that. We want innovation. We want all that stuff. That's been destroyed. Every president has had a graduated tax code for small businesses. Now, you could argue that because of big businesses, wealth and their ability to hire tax avoidance lawyers and all this stuff, that business, it's all screwed up anyway. But one of the things Trump did in 2017, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, did away with the graduated tax system, and we've got a flat tax, 21% corporate flat tax, and didn't do away with the loopholes. So there's no end. So you could still keep paying zero, but you're going to pay less, even if you decided to pay them, a 21% corporate tax rate. So I asked him, I said, look, how did we go from the wealthy in this country, the wildly wealthy, the enormously wealthy, the captains of industry, our billionaire class, our extremely wealthy people, going from a 92% tax rate in 1952 down to 37%? How did that happen? How did corporate America go from a tax rate of 52% down to 21%? Or actually down to effectively zero? Because even when it was 35%, the effective rate was still about 14%. How did that happen? And the reality is what happened is they bought our politics. They bought our representatives. They bought our system. To where, and this is where we agreed, the policies that we want to see enacted, like an increase in the minimum wage, stronger unionization laws, better health care access, stronger infrastructure, better education. This is stuff that even someone who bought the Trump hat agrees with. We can't get it passed. Why? Because the moneyed interests won't allow it. Because that means that they would have to pay for it. Because one of the questions I asked him, I said, when you bought the hat, it says, "Make America Great." When do you think America was great? He goes, well, 1950s. I said, well, this is why it was great. With all of that revenue that came in. Now, understand, nobody paid 92%. There were loopholes, tons of them, but the effective rate was in the high 60s. They were paying a good amount of what they were making, and there weren't all of these, hey, we can figure out how to scheme the system and pay zero. That didn't happen. What did they do with the revenue that they brought in? They funded education. We had education system, the envy of the world. We funded infrastructure. We had an infrastructure envy of the world. We funded higher education, where you could go as far as your talents could take you. As I've said a number of times, I have a friend who went all the way through the University of Michigan, undergraduate all the way through law school, working a crummy minimum wage job, driving a jalopy car, living in a crummy apartment, came out debt-free. You can't do that today. Not even close. You can't get a minimum wage job and get a crappy car and live in a crummy apartment and not go to the University of Michigan, let alone buy something from a vending machine on that campus. And why is that? Well, it's because we've seen a massive redistribution of wealth upward. And this is where the education process and all of this has to come back to. For me, it comes back to the tax code. Get away from all of the stuff that's meant to tear us apart and divide us and keep us pitted against each other. It's about the money. Follow the money. At the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's about dollars and cents. It's not about black and white. It's not about brown. It's about green. It's what I've always believed. I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. I was one of the only white kids in the entire neighborhood. I was the minority in a minority-dominated neighborhood. And what I knew as a very young kid, the only color that mattered was green, because we were all broke. At the end of the day, our cupboards were all bare. We were all eating cereal out of a Cool Whip bowl stained with spaghetti sauce in it. That's the reality. And until we wake up and start going, we do need to get the money out of our politics. We do need to have a tax code that is more progressive and more graduated, to where the bigger your shoulders, the more you pay. Until we start doing those things, nothing else is going to matter. We're going to keep fighting each other over nonsense. We're going to keep fighting each other over pronouns. How stupid is that? Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. Love to hear your thoughts. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Reed Galen from the Lincoln Project going to be here to share some thoughts on maybe how Democrats hold on to the House, maybe hold on to the Senate, maybe something back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day miners' president Ginger Goodwin was shot dead in British Columbia. His murder sparked Canada's first general strike in Vancouver the following week. Goodwin had arrived in British Columbia 8 years earlier and found work in the Cumberland mines on Vancouver Island. He considered working conditions in the mines absolutely appalling and began advocating for safety and organizing miners. He was soon blacklisted after participating in a 2-year coal miners' strike for recognition on the island. He moved to Trail, British Columbia, where he emerged as a Socialist Party candidate in the 1916 election. He was also elected president of the International Union of Mine, Mill and Smelter Workers District 6, the vice president of British Columbia's Federation of Labor, and the head of the local Trades and Labor Council. He openly expressed his opposition to Canada's entry into the war, stating that workers were now employed in killing each other. He was found unfit for military duty after a medical exam. That was until he led a strike for the 8-hour day at Consolidated Mining and Smelting. It was the world's largest lead and zinc smelter and a key munitions producer during the war. His status was quickly changed to make him eligible for conscription. He fled to the Cumberland Hills, where he hid out for months to avoid the draft. And on this day, Goodwin was shot dead by a Dominion Police special constable. He was brought back to Cumberland, where thousands turned out for his funeral in a mile-long procession. The Vancouver labor movement was outraged by Goodwin's murder and called a one-day general strike on August 2nd to protest his killing. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Republican politicos are all over Joe Biden for failing to stop inflation. Perhaps you wonder, though, what these squawkers would do if they were in charge. No need to wonder. Just look back to 1974. When Americans were being pummeled by price spikes that topped 12%, nearly double what we're enduring today. But by gollies, President Gerald Ford and his Republican contingent in Congress met the challenge head-on with a new magical program of economic uplift they called WIN, Whip Inflation Now. But it was nothing, just a political slogan with no magic and no action behind it. Price controls, antitrust action? No. GOP Inc. didn't want to offend, much less punish, corporate titans for a little profiteering. So they shifted the blame for inflation to consumers, demanding that families just say no to price gouging. Ford himself went on national TV, urging fellow citizens to join him in buying, quote, only those products and services priced at or below present levels. The core of the Republican program, then, was telling hard-hit wage earners to battle the monopolistic behemoths of big oil, big pharma, big food et al. On their own by simply refusing to pay inflated prices for the gasoline, medicines, groceries, and such that, hello, they had to have. As a reward, everyone who signed a form promising to be an inflation fighter was sent a nifty win button indicating their patriotic participation. Sure enough, Americans responded enthusiastically with an avalanche of ridicule. Even Ford's top economic advisor was whopper-jawed by the GOP's idea that the substance of their policy was a political button. It was surreal. I said to myself, this is unbelievable stupidity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the folks over at the 538 blog, they've come out and said that, hey, there might be a chance for Democrats come November. Now the narrative is, bloodbath. The narrative is, it's the midterms. Sitting president, his party always takes a beating. But this is the first time that it shows Democrats with a chance to hold on to the Senate. I actually think there's a chance that they could increase their 50-50 margin. I'm hoping here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, you see, John Fetterman come out ahead of Dr. Quack, which again, someone who has no business whatsoever running for Senate, let alone Senate here in my state of Pennsylvania. But look, if Herschel Walker is still within striking distance in Georgia, anything is possible. And here to share some thoughts on, this November and maybe how Democrats don't get slaughtered, I've asked Reed Galen to come talk with us. Reed is the co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Reed, thanks for taking time for us.
No, thanks for having me back, Rick.
So I'm looking at this and I'm going, this is a good sign. 538 is now, saying, hey, there's a chance. 51% doesn't make me all warm and fuzzy, but it's still better than it was.
Well, look, all you got to win by is, 50% plus one. So let's take what we can get. I think it is good news. I think it's moving in the right direction. As I think, the fallout from the Dobbs decision on abortion is starting to take hold. I think that the January 6th committee hearings have had a depressive effect on, I think, especially older Republicans when it comes to, Rick, they're old enough to remember, a party I knew. You may not have been a fan of Ronald Reagan or George H.W. Bush, but they were, and they don't see this as that party anymore. And gas prices are starting to come down, as we saw. It looks like Senator Manchin from down in West Virginia is actually going to sign on to a deal. And so I think that there is good momentum. I think also one thing you noted about President Biden is President Biden has, low approval ratings. I don't think we should deny that, but it does not seem to be translating, at least in this moment, into electoral hardship for Democratic candidates. And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah. Now here's the thing. I remember Reagan. I grew up during the Reagan era. No, I wasn't a fan of his policies. But I didn't have the kind of disdain that we see for politicians today. I respected him. I respected H.W. Bush. Didn't vote for him, but I had respect for them. And we're talking about a different era that I'm pining to go back to, where we're fighting over issues, we're fighting over policy, and not over dehumanizing someone you disagree with.
Yeah, well, that started, in the mid 1990s under Newt Gingrich, right, where he understood fundamentally how to nationalize an election and how to make every federal election about issues that typically Republicans want to talk about and Democrats have not always been the best at countering. And I think you're right about this, Rick. When it comes to culture wars, Republicans like to start them and Democrats like to lose them. I think that's a little bit different this time. I think that on the abortion issue, because it is so, there's a broad feeling amongst likely voters, right, that this is a net negative for women in America, and then I think we start to see some of the fallout from these things. The little girl over next door in Ohio, or stories of women going into the hospital with ectopic pregnancies where they've hemorrhaged. These are having real world effects, and so I think in some ways the Republicans caught the car. They're the dog that caught the car.
Yeah. Now you said that Republicans like to fight over issues that Democrats like to lose. I look at Adam Kinzinger's tweet today, going after Vice President Harris for her, saying that going through her pronouns and saying that she's wearing a blue dress and that she's a woman, to a room full of blind people, and him saying this is why the left can't win elections, and everybody immediately jumped on him. Without understanding what he was saying. You don't put yourself in this position to give the right the kind of fodder to go after you with. He wasn't saying don't be good to these communities, but don't say this kind of stuff to give ammunition to the other side, is what I think he was trying to say.
Oh, I think that's probably right. I think both the White House's release of that, I think, was inartful because they didn't provide any context. When I saw it too, I thought, Rick, I don't know, because again, I didn't understand why she was describing the clothes she was wearing. Because why would you do that unless, again, you were at a table full of blind people, in which case it makes perfect sense. I think that Kinzinger is right, even if it's not a popular opinion, that wokeism, or whatever you're going to call it, is not broadly a popular sort of mindset for Americans. I don't think most folks Rick, with some notable exceptions, and in your literal neighborhood, wake up hoping to be their worst self every day. And I don't think people like having it necessarily put in their face every day. That does not necessarily mean we don't have significant issues across both, racial and economic boundaries that we must confront head on. But that, as you know, it's very hard to convince somebody to at least accept your opinion as valid if the first thing and only thing you ever do is tell them what a bad person they are to start with.
Yeah, I mean, we're in very interesting times now. I'm sure you saw the president's speech yesterday, where he laid out his vision for the next. Well, after a long litany of whining and complaining about past grievances, laid out his vision for what is he hopes the next president's able to do. Kind of a law and order speech, which seems to me, as I took from it, usurping those states' rights that Republicans used to love so much, and giving ultimate federal powers. Going to federalize the National Guard, going to crack down on drug dealers, going to start executing people. Curious your thoughts. Does that speech give you a warm, fuzzy feeling?
No, it gives me a cold chill down my spine. I mean, it's not that different from the convention speech he gave in 2016. It's not that different from the inaugural speech he gave at the beginning of 2017. And now he's just reiterating his, and I think Stephen Miller, the ghoul that works for him, wrote that speech, this, American dystopian hellscape that, his folks desperately want to believe in. And, it is a law and order speech, but when, we can all agree, I think, Rick, that homelessness, especially in dense urban areas, is endemic and a significant issue with which we should deal, and we're not taking it seriously. I don't think anybody's taking it seriously, particularly. But the idea of setting up camps, outside of major cities, brings back an awful lot of bad memories, and I think is the kind of thing that where Trump is now just veering into the weird and bizarre. He's always been strange. He's always been crazy. But now the things he's asking for, or talking about, are getting more and more extreme. But that may be true of the people who support him as well.
No, it's crazy. But I think what you just said is across the board reality. We're not dealing with any of our real problems. We're still throwing pies at each other while we haven't raised the minimum wage in 13 years. We haven't done anything really, substantial on healthcare or education, and we still got a debt crisis. There's so many problems that just seem to keep piling up, and we're still just eating each other.
Well, I think we're eating each other. That's true, but I think also when it comes to eating, the best way to eat an elephant, metaphorically anyway, is one bite at a time. Which is, yes, we have a lot of systemic issues because of the polarization, but also because, we are in many ways, Rick, a country in denial. We don't want to have to deal with these problems. We don't want to have to deal with this idea. I mean, to your point about the minimum wage, if Democrats in Congress said they wanted to raise the minimum wage from $7.25 to some, I don't know what the definition is literally of living wage right now, Rick, but the business community would go bananas. And, then the libertarians would come in and say, oh, you have to work your way up. I mean, that's all well and good, in an Ayn Rand novel. That doesn't really work for somebody who's working at Starbucks for, $11.50 an hour. Now, wages, I think, have increased, which is good. But I think that's as much due to a shortage of workers as opposed to workers being able to live on, something that they can take home, try and put something away, try and buy a home, try and even build some level of stability financially, which I think is so far out of reach for far too many Americans, excuse me.
Yeah, well, the numbers they go into, had the minimum wage kept up with inflation from the late 1960s till today, it'd be about $14 an hour. Had it kept up with productivity, it'd be close to $26 an hour. Those are the numbers. And yet it's still $7.25, and I have no idea how anyone lives on that. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Well, I mean, look, and Rick, I hate to interrupt, but just like we are the most westernized post-industrial economy in the world, right? The largest economy the world has ever seen. And the idea that, people are supposed to live on the cost of a large latte, right, every hour just seems, again, disparate from reality, to say the least.
No, absolutely, and it's one of those things that's it's angering and frustrating and all of that combined. But we've had 3 presidents that have been able to raise the minimum wage. Reagan didn't want to do it. Obama couldn't do it, and Trump, there was no way he was going to do it. And now we're in another term of Biden. I don't think it's going to happen in his term either. This is not good stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Make sure you check out the work that they do at LincolnProject.com. I want to get your thoughts on this third party that is evidently forming. I don't know if you've seen this yet.
Sure.
Andrew Yang and Christy Todd Whitman are coming together with the Forward Party. I'm curious, given this idea that Democrats might have a shot of holding on to the Senate, that do you think this hurts or helps the effort in 24 for Democrats or Republicans? How do you see this breaking out?
Well, in full disclosure, I used to be chief strategist for one of the three groups that came together today to do this, and I spent 2 years and about $2 million trying to found a party. We got exactly one ballot line in one state, Rick. That was New York. And it will disappear this November because the Democrats decided they didn't want any more competition. This is a very hard thing to do in the United States. We are not a parliamentary system, right? Where in a state legislature or in Congress, if it was the Republicans, the Democrats, the Greens, the Libertarians, and now the Forwards, everybody would get a percentage of votes, right? They'd get to send that percentage of the body to Washington, D.C. or state capitol. Also, the two parties, both Republican and Democrat, make it incredibly difficult for new entrants, right? They put up ballot access laws, that's what it's called, to avoid having more competition. Do I think the political system needs more competition? I think it does. But then I think the last part too is all 50 states have their own rules about how you can qualify a new party. And some of them, like Utah, where I live, you basically fill out some paperwork, name some officers, and open a bank account, and voila, you're done. In California, it's a $12 or $13 million proposition. In a place like Iowa, you can only do it, during presidential election cycles. So it's a very Byzantine and complicated process. But I think the broader issue for all of this, Rick, is that each of these parties, and I was guilty of it too, they want to take a little bit of the left and a little bit of the right, and they want to make everybody feel better. And they say, we're going to compromise, we're going to come together, we're going to work together. And it's this triangulation. The problem is and I say this with all due respect to the people that are doing it, because I know many of them, is that it's not backed in belief, right? There's, if you think back to the last major party we had come out in this country, it was in 1854. It was called the Republican Party.
Right.
They had one goal, to get rid of slavery, to abolish slavery. It was a hateful institution. It was an amoral institution, and it was one that must be destroyed within the boundaries of the United States. Now, it became other things as it went, right? But it had a founding belief system. And I think what you see now is that voters understand when they're being pandered to, and this feels a lot like pandering. I think the other problem, too, is that Andrew Yang, failed Democratic presidential candidate, Christy Todd Whitman, former governor of New Jersey, I have an immense amount of respect for. But, Governor Whitman hasn't been in office in like 22 years. Andrew Yang has never been elected to anything, was an interesting blip, I thought, in the Democratic primary of 2020. But who else are they going to bring to this? Because the two-party system is entrenched. Now, listen, I travel the country, Rick. Nobody likes either party, don't get me wrong. I'm just not sure that this is the answer, and I'm not sure when it comes to 2024, what the impact is, especially, and I say this, there was a story in this outlet Puck about the fact that another group, No Labels, is raising $50 million to run an independent presidential candidate in 2024. So if that's the case, then you could see, as wild and woolly a deal in 24 as we've seen since 92, and that frankly wasn't that exciting.
Yeah, if I was going to start a third party, it'd be a Labor Party, because to your point, a single issue, making people's lives better wages, hours, conditions. For me, that's the way forward. Before I let you go, I wanted to get some of your thoughts on some of the stories coming out around Donald Trump. Evidently, he's talking about suing CNN for defamation, and evidently the RNC is threatening that if he runs for president, they're not going to pay his legal bills anymore. Any thoughts on those?
He will never actually sue CNN because I think, was it the New York Times, the Washington Post, had 100,000 documented lies he had told. So he is by definition a liar, even in the most objective sense. And also, he doesn't want discovery, right? He doesn't want CNN crawling around in his business. So that's just something to try and throw some red meat. The RNC, I think, is sick of paying his bills, Rick. I think they're sick of paying his legal bills, and they know that they're going to mount as the January 6th stuff moves down the road, and they don't want to be on the hook for it if he's indicted while he's president, because that will be tens of millions of dollars. I don't think they want to be on the hook for it at all. But I think that's the one thing they have going for them. Now, let's be clear, Rick. If he runs for president and he tells them, like, you're going to pay my legal bills, they're going to pay his legal bills.
Why are they paying his legal bills is my question.
It was, as I understand it, it was a deal he made with them before he left office, was that if, you know what, I could be wrong about this, Rick. I think if they wanted to use his name for fundraising, they had to pay his legal bills.
Got it. That's right.
So,
that makes sense now. So maybe under the bus, and maybe this January 6th stuff will be it. Do you think Garland indicts at some point? Let me get that last question in.
I think he probably does. I think it'll be but I think his attorneys, right, his prosecutors are probably hard at work trying to figure out how to put the case together. And like any old good crime drama, right, they'll start with the little fish and they'll work to the bigger fish.
There you go. Reed, I appreciate the time. Always great talk with you. Always insightful. Good stuff.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks so much, Reed Galen, co-founder of the Lincoln Project, lincolnproject.com, the website. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1903. Labor leader Mother Mary Harris Jones was leading a march of children laborers to President Theodore Roosevelt's summer home in New York. The long march had began 20 days before in Philadelphia. Mother Jones was hoping to draw national attention to the plight of child workers. The action caught the public's attention, and across the nation, newspapers reported on the March of the Mill Children. All the way in Leadville, a town in the mountains of Colorado west of Denver, the Herald Democrat carried the story of Mother Jones's East Coast March. The paper's July 27th article began, quote, "It is a pathetic spectacle. That little army of Mother Jones, marching through the broiling heat of summer, lay a petition before the president. She says truly that her errand is as vital as any which takes persons to Oyster Bay. She comes to please the cause of the child laborers, and to emphasize her protest, has with her several score of ill-clad, puny children, the result of the enforced work of these children in factories. When the children's march reached the president's door 2 days later, the president was not there to meet them. Yet the march had sparked national attention. In 1904, the National Child Labor Committee formed to take action on the issue. Pennsylvania passed tougher child labor restrictions the next year, but federal protections would have to wait until the next President Roosevelt. The passage of the Fair Labor Standards Act in 1938, signed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, finally included nationwide limits to child labor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, Reed made a comment there that sending people into labor camps or homeless camps, something that maybe we shouldn't do. You've got a Senate candidate, this guy named Jim Lehman, who is proposing sending undocumented immigrants. Now remember, you got the Trump kids saying, hey, we can take those homeless people, move them out of the cities and put them in the homeless camps, way out of town, out of sight, out of mind. Now you've got Senate candidates saying, no, what we do with those illegals is we put them out in the Pacific Ocean, in labor camps out in the Pacific Ocean. He said, those islands that we spent blood and treasure securing back in World War II, a few of those out there, I think they need to go out and do 5 years hard time busting rocks out there, making them into gravel for their food. Just get rid of them out of this country if they're so bad they've been illegally crossed and committed crimes. He said he wouldn't stop with. He said it would stop undocumented immigrants from coming back again. That's his view. And what's interesting to me is, and I keep coming back to, remember, these are the people who tell us that this is a Christian nation. Remember that. I mean, this is the important part of this. These are the God-fearing people who want to do the most horrible, abusive things to others. Mean-spirited, hateful kind of things. All in the name of some religion that I don't understand. And it's angering. And for me, it's part of the distraction. It's part of a fight that I don't think we should have to have, because I hope we're a better country than this. And I know that, right now there are people going, hey, this is how the Democrats are going to hold on to the House, and how they're going to grab the Senate, because you've got all these really way out wackadoodles who are running for office. I look at where I live in Pennsylvania, that I always thought was a relatively sane place. The fact that Doug Mastriano, who I view as an out-and-out Nazi, is running neck and neck with Josh Shapiro frightens me, because he is the most extreme of the most extreme. His positions on issue after issue are the most extreme and hateful. And yet couched in that little frame of Christianity, good white Christianity, not that other kind, or any other version, that most extreme version. And this is where the fear comes in, because Mitt Romney's not wrong when he says be careful what you wish for. You put these crazy people out there, some of them could win. And what will that mean for our country? I mean, I look at Marjorie Three Names. I look at Lauren Boebert. Imagine if they were no longer the most extreme. Imagine the next, because I remember thinking, I don't think anyone could be worse than Stephen King from Iowa, or Louis Gohmert. I don't think anybody can get worse than that. Hold my beer, because here comes Matt Gaetz and his comments recently. Oh, on the Matt Gaetz front, remember we talked about this the other day? How he said, those people who are pro-choice, they're odious. No one's going to impregnate them. And he put out a picture of a woman, basically shaming her. Well, her organization's raised over $200,000 to fight for reproductive rights for women, and good for her, and good for her group. And I hope folks will continue to give her more to help fight for that, just to shove it up. This is that moment where the sane, the rational, the silent majority, we the people, need to come together and speak out. Because the lunatic fringe is out there. And I hate that. This is not the fight. This is not the segment I want. This is not the moment I want to be in. I want to be talking about, hey, how can we make lives better? This is why I started this. When I started this program, it was about, hey, how do we make lives better? Not how do we defend and hold on to what little we have left. Not how do we clutch on to what little is left of the 20th century. But how do we improve? How do we make lives better? How do we fight for better wages, hours, conditions, educational opportunity, retirement, you name it. How do we do that thing that Gomper said? What does labor want? More of the things that make our lives better, more of the opportunities to make manhood more noble, womanhood more beautiful, childhood more, more. Instead of where we are, in this constant defense of what's left. And look, this Supreme Court we've got, The 20th century is most certainly under attack. All of the progress of our grandparents and that generation, all on the chopping block. And they're not shy about it. This is the thing that's important. Pay attention to what they are saying to us. Listen to what they're telling us. Listen to the world that they want to create. It's a dangerous place. It's a scary place, especially if you don't conform with their narrow-minded views. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're just joining us or missed any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. Also, thericksmithshow.com.
Just in the past 48 hours, the Oak Fire has exploded in size.
State of emergency declared over new fire near Yosemite National Park.
The previously unprecedented, is now becoming routine.
Simultaneous global heat waves are now 6 times more frequent, thanks to global warming.
Thanks, global warming.
Plus, new study quantifies just how much climate damage rich nations have caused to poor ones.
All of that damage and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
According to CBS News, brutal and dangerous temperatures were felt from California to Massachusetts. Okay, CBS News, just say America.
Yep, this is your Green News Report.
That's like telling your partner, hey, before we get intimate, I should warn you I have this little rash from my right toe to my left ear.
Okay, Desi Doyen, yeah, it has been incredibly hot across, well, much of the entire country over the past few days, yes, although it is beginning to cool down a bit in some of those places.
KCAA Loma Linda.